I have a really strange question to ask you to start, because I was listening to a podcast that you did, I think 2 years ago. So I'll forgive you if you don't remember the reference specifically, because it was offhand. But you mentioned something about how you have a punk rock ethos and background. And this was in reference to you doing things your own way, being entrepreneurial. So the word punk rock caught my attention. Was that deliberate? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, punk rock is sort of anti-authoritarian. So I guess from a content perspective, because that's what people are, content marketers that are listening to this podcast, I think it's saying, well, why can't I rank on the first page of Google? All this other stuff, there's a brand name behind it, but the content ain't that great. I can do better. So it's having this more like this aggressive that, I don't have to listen. I don't have to do things as I've been told. I can reach greater heights by doing it my way. If everybody is zigging, I zag. And that to me, there's also this ethos. One of my favorite bands, this is like real niche band. They were called the Minutemen. And the leader of the band, the bassist Mike Watt, after most of their live performances, he would say, go out there, create something, be an artist, start a band. It was this whole like do-it-yourself sort of environment that he was preaching. And that to me is also part of this like punk rock of, do it yourself, right? You don't have to have a fancy camera to start a YouTube channel. I started my podcast literally on my iPhone using the Voice app, which limited me to 8-minute episodes because that was the extent at which it could record. So that definitely has kept me, I don't know, it's sort of lit my fire, and I think it's probably come out of my voice right now as well. And it's really interesting because I know we're going a little bit off the topic of content marketing, but I wrote a book on influencer marketing, and once you begin to get authority in your space, you have a lot of people, a lot of entities, a lot of brands reach out to you, and it's like, I don't want to be controlled by a brand. I don't want to be controlled by anyone. It's probably why I'm a solopreneur and why I like to, have my own consultancy and do things the way I do. But I think that we all have so much potential, and we sometimes limit ourselves. So to me, the whole punk rock ethos is I'm going to go uncontrolled and I'm going to go for the ceiling of whatever I'm out there to accomplish, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah. This lights me up too. I played in a punk rock band in high school.
No way.
And,
okay.
Yeah. So, and it sounds like you actually have like the punk rock kind of like music roots too. Like it's, an idea, but also there was the music and the DIY scene that kind of influenced that.
Yeah, no, I played violin like when I was young, and I was actually in a band in high school where we put a pickup on the violin and sort of play. But yeah, I was heavily, I grew up in Southern California right when Southern California punk rock scene was happening. I had older brothers who had friends that would take me to concerts when I was like a freshman in high school. And yeah, I saw some amazing music back then, and that's like my DNA. That's like in my blood, right? I just, my daughter's like, why don't you like listening to like Duran Duran and Wham? And I'm like, dude, like when I was growing up, I hated that stuff. Like it was so sappy and poppy, and like it's got to be guitar based drums. So yeah, that's me.
There was something about it too that I think, like in a land absent of opportunity, there was something seductive about the idea that you could do things without permission. And that was the DIY ethos that I kind of was inspired by through that scene. Like I remember I grew up in a small town and we were all underage, so we couldn't play at bars and stuff like that. So we played music, we were practiced, we were playing songs, and we're like, what do we do? Like, how do we get gigs? And we ended up just like renting out the town hall in my small town and booking other bands from the area. And we're like, let's just do it ourselves, And I think a lot of how I've come to create content, like I did the same thing starting like a personal website when I was like, how do I get jobs? How do I get picked? I'm like, I'll just start writing about stuff and see like what happens. I think when you have that thread line, it becomes a very powerful operating model, for putting stuff out in the world.
Yeah, so this band called the Minutemen, they were good friends with Black Flag. They were on their label, and Black Flag is Henry Rollins, and you get the whole picture there for those of you that know punk rock. But one of their like themes also was we jam econo, right? You don't need expensive instruments, expensive amplifiers to be able to jam. And that also, like, every time I'm investing in a tool or, I need to hire a resource, I am definitely trying to jam econo because I don't need like, the nice fix-ups. I want to see the actual quality of the work or the product and then pay what I think is fair for that. So in many ways, growing up listening to that music has influenced me.
I love that. I want to talk more about a couple of the influences that I've heard just doing research and listening to your other podcast interviews. One is that you said you did B2B sales for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting, because do you consider yourself like a content marketer now, or like what do you kind of primarily consider yourself in the marketing world?
Yeah, so my background, I do not have a traditional marketing background, and I will be very open in saying that. My background is more B2B sales, and this is before social media, but it was B2B sales in Asia, in foreign countries, where I was often like VP of sales or country manager. So I had to wear a lot of hats. I was almost like an entrepreneur having my own company inside a bigger company. So, well, in order to get sales, what do? We got to build relationships. We got to go to conferences. We got to build up partners. So inevitably, through the act of playing this role, I started to do a lot of things that were quasi-marketing without knowing I was doing marketing. One second, sorry, my son is asking for more screen time. It was that when social media really started and I moved back to the United States and I was in transition, and at the end of the day, I got really active on LinkedIn. I launched a blog all about LinkedIn, and then we had the Lehman Brothers crash. It was 2009, and I ended up writing a book on LinkedIn, and that led to all these opportunities. Back then, the marketing or the budgets for social media weren't in sales. They were all marketing. In fact, back then, it was also PR. So I like to say social media is sort of an industry that found me. And really it was companies that were trying to figure out how do they leverage this for their business. And I was trying to figure out and help them try to fit in where they would leverage it for their business. And marketing was always the answer. And so I just became, someone that self-studied, right? But tapping into my own business experience before that, but also helping a variety of companies very, very early on in my career, I was able to gain this expertise because you learn by doing, right? And by analyzing and by optimizing. And, I think it was like 2011 where people started calling me a marketer. And I'm like, okay, because the majority of my work at that point was social media marketing, even though I had this book on LinkedIn and I had this B2B sales background. So I still do social selling trainings, but I had this question asked to me on another podcast very recently. I look at business very holistically, right? So I don't consider myself a content marketer. I wrote a book on influencer marketing, the age of influence. I don't consider myself an influencer marketer either. I want to help businesses leverage digital and social media marketing for their business. And, if SEO is the right solution for one and content marketing for another and influencer marketing for another and TikTok for another, that's great, right? I want to be able to be the doctor who prescribes the best solution and implements best practices in helping them solve their issue. And that's always been my goal, never to be a one-trick pony, but to really be, I guess you could call it a generalist, but to be dangerous enough in every single topic to be able to help companies.
I like that fluidity. And I think that's great in comparison to sometimes people get very dogmatic about what they specifically do. And they think, if you're not doing this, you're going to be left behind. But it's like, it's all contextual, right? It's
a conflict of interest then because, I noticed that after I finished the rough draft of my first book on LinkedIn, okay, what's next? I then became a huge user of Twitter. This is back in 2009. So I was very early. And even Facebook was starting to open up to people older than university students at the time. And I never wanted to be like, I didn't want to force my clients into just using LinkedIn. And I didn't want to only be able to take on business if it had a LinkedIn angle. It was just unrealistic with the way that business works. And what happens if LinkedIn goes out of business, right? Mm-hmm. All those people that evangelized, Dig or StumbleUpon or MySpace or Google Plus or a Clubhouse more recently, right? I have a historical perspective on that stuff, and I knew that I needed to understand the landscape. And then, like I said, become the doctor to be able to prescribe the right solution. So yeah, I don't like that dogmatic, you have to do this. These days, like you have to do NFTs. It's like, well, yes, NFTs are growing. They're one part of the landscape. But, if you invested that same $10,000 into SEO, you might get a little bit better performance than investing in an NFT right now, depending on your audience. So it's having that really holistic perspective. Weiji Amakano, if it was my money, this is how I'd spend it. And that's the way I approach my, client relationships as well.